everyone, welcome back to Punch Drunk Critics. I'm Cortland Jacoby, and today I have actress, activist, podcaster, and TikToker, Abby Morris from the More Than Tracy Turnblad podcast. Thank you so much for joining me finally.
Of course, I'm really excited to be here.
Awesome. So today we are actually talking about the much anticipated limited series in like the Bridgerton cinematic universe, Queen Charlotte.
It really is the Bridgerton cinematic universe, isn't it?
We're starting the BCU. So the show is produced by ShondaLand, and premiered on Netflix last week, and follows the early life and marriage of not yet Queen Charlotte, and the widowhood of Lady Danbury, and the young womanhood of a pre-Bridgerton Violet. Forget her last name at the time, but she's before she marries Edmund and has 8 children. We see how the events of the Queen's past affect her future, the future of the monarchy, and how her love for her husband George stays strong amidst heavy mental illness. So, Abby, before we jump in, and by the way, there will be spoilers in this show. This will probably go out on Monday or Tuesday, so you should have had the weekend to watch the show. People, get with it. So, what is your relationship to Bridgerton?
So I'm not really a big period drama Regency girly, but I am a big romance girly, and I grew up on rom-coms. So when Bridgerton came out, I wasn't very excited about it, and I kind of had trouble getting through the first season, to be honest. And if I'm being dead honest, I mostly watched it because people were like, there's so much sex, and I was like, I gotta see what this is about.
Yeah.
And I conned my boyfriend at the time into watching it with me. And we were like, oh my God, now I'm swallowing something so weird.
It took your breath away.
No, we were actually like, wow, there's way less sex in this than we were told.
Yeah.
But that was my relationship to the first season of Bridgerton. And then I became invested in Penelope by the end of the season, because I host a podcast about body representation in media, in Hollywood, etc. And I was interested in her as this sort of prototypical fatter character that shows up in a lot of various media, of this archetype of that sort of tragic wallflower who is in love with an unattainable guy, which annoys me, but I love a lot of other things about the character, and that they've given her more than just that. So because of this, I decided to watch season 2, even though I was like, season 1 wasn't really my bag.
Mm-hmm.
I loved season 2.
Okay.
I was obsessed, immediately obsessed, watching all the edits on YouTube, because just that type of romance story grabbed my attention. And then I read the books, which is so unlike me. I've never gotten through a single Jane Austen. I tried so hard to read Jane Eyre, and I got 20 pages in and just couldn't keep going.
And I hated Jane Eyre, by the way. I had to read that book so many times throughout my school career, and I threw it against the wall every single time. I hate that book. Do not blame you. Anyway.
I was like, this is cool. This seems kind of feminist of her to write a book about this woman wanting more agency. And then I just found myself reading the same page over and over again. So, which is funny because I was always a really big reader, and I read Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings and all this Hunger Games was a big one for me, but the dense language was really tough for me to get through.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was my relationship to Bridgerton. Reading the books, I ended up having strong opinions. I read the first 4 because of I was trying to get to Penelope so I could do a pre-her season, some content about what are we expecting based on the book, right? Yeah, and I really liked the books. I actually really enjoyed them. And now I'm fully interested and invested in the Bridgerton cinematic universe.
Well, what's so interesting about the books too is that the Queen is not a character. And I'm sure we'll talk about this later on, about representation and why we have a strong Black female lead here. But in the books, she's kind of gone. Lady Danbury is sort of has sort of that figurehead role over the Ton in a very
Yeah, Lady Danbury is funny in the books. She's very like,
Yeah.
she's like a yenta.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
that's the best way I can describe it. For those of you who don't know
Yeah.
Judaism, a yenta means a busybody, and the character of Yenta from Fiddler on the Roof is the matchmaker. And that's basically Lady Danbury, and she's always like so on top of everything and like knows everything before everyone else. And she's kind of like, she reminds me of one of those like, I mean, this is a very New York reference, but you know the old ladies on the Upper East Side with the fur coat and the little dog?
Mhm. Yeah.
She's that.
Yeah.
Or
I
like
think,
the ladies from Only Murders in the Building who live in
yeah.
that building, that type.
Oh yeah. That's a great media comparison right there. Oh, yeah.
And
Uh,
she's so different in the show, but I
yeah.
think of it as two different characters. I love them both equally in very different ways.
What aspects of Bridgerton were you hoping that Queen Charlotte would have starting out before watching?
The like I just love the like love tension and the banter and the sexual
Nice.
tension before anything happens. So that. Um and I what I actually have been wanting from Bridgerton for a long time was for Violet to get a second chance at love, and this actually almost went there. So that was really exciting.
We'll talk about that too. We'll definitely talk about that.
Yeah.
Okay. So what were your overall thoughts about the show about Queen Charlotte?
I cried at the last scene.
Yeah.
Um, I really liked how they did it was different than a standard formulaic Bridgerton romance book.
Yes.
Um, and I really loved how they were exploring this like unconditional love that it was less of an idealization of characters and more
Yeah.
of like truly loving the whole complicatedness of a person, which I think we don't see enough of. And I
Yeah.
think that's amazing. And like, because I feel like that's actually what it is. Like, if you want the love that like you see in movies and stuff, like it's not, oh my God, he's the perfect man and there's an obstacle, but the obstacle gets fixed and we get married and it's all happy. It's like, okay, I picked you, I accept you, even the parts that are gonna make my life really fucking hard.
Right. What I really liked about this show in comparison to Bridgerton was that this limited series is a romance novel. Well, I guess I should say it's a story about loving someone with a severe mental illness
Yeah.
and wrapped up in like a really, fun romance novel, I guess is the best
Mm-hmm.
way to do it, which we don't really see. Like, we see stories about loving people with depression or loving people with anxiety or bipolar disorder, but we never see something really like of loving someone with psychosis as you
Yeah.
learn. And if I'm sure a lot of people did in school, King George III, the same one that we got our independence from, was known as Mad King George and had what I believe was, they say that it was probably like bipolar 1, bipolar 2, and then a mix with a blood disease that also causes
Yeah.
psychosis. But they're not entirely sure. So we see kind of this love story that's very much rooted in, like you said, like loving the entire person, warts and madness and all. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I was really excited for this show because I wanted to kind of see how the wonderful Queen Charlotte that we know in Bridgerton, who's so commanding and steals every single freaking scene she's in, how that would transfer into like a limited series and see where she
Yeah.
came from. Um, I love that we kind of get this very different side of Violet Bridgerton. She's very much the
Mm-hmm.
monarch in Bridgerton, but in this show, she's almost like the little sister, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then we also see two very different Lady Danburys. We see Lady
Oh
Danbury
my gosh.
beginning of her life where I feel, and tell me if you agree, I feel like the Lady Danbury that we see, the younger one, um, reminds me more of the one in the book than the older Lady Danbury that we see in the show.
I guess I see that. I think I definitely see how one could evolve into the other.
Right.
And I could not freaking believe the resemblance between the actors. Holy crap, the
This is
casting for
the
this was
best cast.
on point. And the casting for Queen Charlotte, like how did they find this actor who looks exactly like the one they already
I
had?
mean, the evolution. I mean, if you were to tell me that there was a Nepo baby situation going on, I would say I don't blame you. This is like perfect casting. Who cares? But this is
Oh, like if it was like, oh yeah, this is my
oh, this is
actual
her
daughter.
niece
Yeah,
or
no.
her daughter, or this is even her like godchild. Like I
I
would
mean,
have been
that's what
fine with that.
Nepo babies are for.
Yes, this is the scenario. And it's perfect casting. She matches the I don't want to say original, but she matches the older Queen Charlotte
Yeah.
tone and mannerisms
And you
and
see that evolve over the show too. Like by
yeah,
the last episode, she's doing so much. I started seeing so much more that they were doing that,
absolutely.
like sounding like each other, acting like each other, looking like each other, the same facial expressions. Amazing work from both of them.
Amazing
All
work
of them.
from them. And then also like shout out to the casting department over
Yeah.
there. Like really,
Oh
like
my God.
that is where the Netflix money is going. So let's talk a little bit about the scale, right? When we think Bridgerton, like that's something that I think really blew me away in season one was just the
Mm-hmm.
scale of everything. Um,
Yeah.
the production design, the number of flowers that are in like every single ball scene. You've got the music and covered you got musical covers that made Bridgerton. So talk to me a little bit about the scale for you of Queen Charlotte.
Well, I loved the costume design.
Yeah.
Gorgeous costumes. I have no idea if it's historically accurate. You cannot ask me about that. I don't know shit. But I really, really liked the jewels gowns. Was
Yeah.
loving that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think we get more outdoor shots from Bridgerton, and there was a little bit of that, but I missed some of it. And then as far as the music, the covers didn't jump out to me as much
Yeah.
this time. Like they weren't as obvious, and I think that's a good thing because the pop music, okay, I'm the child of two classical violinists.
Yeah.
So I am a very specific person to be talking about this.
Right.
But the truth, I grew up listening to lots of music from that era. And
Mhm.
it does not sound like a modern pop song. It's much more complicated. It's
Yeah.
much more like contrapuntal. There's a lot more just going on in the music, which because it's not originally a vocal line.
Right.
So when it would, they would have like a Taylor Swift song or
Yeah.
whatever, which actually Wildest Dreams is the only Bridgerton cover that I'm like, all right.
Yeah.
Um it felt like it was so just kind of the melody line.
Yeah.
And then they might add a couple things in, but it was like
A little bit of like
just
percussive strumming.
and I'm not a stickler for historical accuracy as I said, but like that the pop songs to me when I first watched it, I was like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
I'm getting used to it now though, and I liked the covers they chose for this series a lot better. But
Well,
again, I'm coming from classical music world.
yeah.
And I'm like, how could you not use like the actual music when it's right there? It gets performed all the time.
I should say that Bridgerton is only, or excuse me, Queen Charlotte is only 6 episodes. I felt like the covers, I mean, I can only really remember like 4 covers throughout the entire limited series that they really did. They really did rely a lot on just straight classical orchestration, I felt.
I mean, I don't know if those were they were not actually
Right.
from the period, but they were in the style a little more, I guess.
Written by Chris Bowers. Yeah, yeah.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
I will say that the covers that they did do were all of like Black female pop icons. So you got
Didn't
your,
they do Olivia Rodrigo?
did they? I thought,
I saw
maybe I didn't
somebody
catch
say
it.
that in the Vulture recap. I could be wrong.
Oh, okay. Well, I caught that they were all Black icons, which makes sense because the
Yeah.
show is so amazing with their Black female representation. You got your Beyonce. I think I clocked. There was Alicia Keys.
There's
There
Whitney Houston.
Whitney Houston at the very end.
Mm-hmm.
But because uh, the storyline is so heavily reliant on their private life and on George's illness, we don't
Right.
get like there's a ball once an episode at Bridgerton. So you're getting all of this like diegetic, i.e., like if you're hearing a cover, they're hearing the same cover in the show, right? Like
Right.
for the people listening. And so that's sort of part of Bridgerton's sonic makeup here they continue that tradition on, but there's not a lot of like space, I guess, for them to have some of these pop songs, because it is also in the world. Like, you know, if you hear Whitney Houston, you'll see a orchestra playing that on the dance floor, you know, or beside the dance floor, not on the dance floor.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I don't mind the pop covers as much as you. I think for me,
few people do.
It's a really interesting take. Like, I appreciate it. I just don't know if, for me, I felt like the musical scale of that just felt down, like lower.
Oh, see, that's what I liked. I was like, great. I don't want to be like humming Ariana Grande in the middle of watching this period show.
Fair. Totally fair. I mean, I get that. And I get why Bridgerton wants to do it differently, right? We don't have any of that in, you know, the 1996 version of Pride of Prejudice with or even like we get that a little bit in the newest version of Persuasion, but I absolutely hate that adaptation, and I don't know why I brought it up. But we don't normally get that in your traditional period pieces. But yeah, I felt like that also with the costumes and with this scale, because we are following their private life more. We don't get like, I guess because it was about Queen Charlotte, I was expecting more flash.
Oh, that makes sense.
And we didn't get that, which I have mixed feelings about. I think that's a good thing, because I think also, you know, we have this perception that royalty has super extravagant life all the time, and that's not necessarily always true.
Right.
But also like I felt like because George's storyline is so heavy, I felt like there needed something visually on the scale and balance that out. So let's talk a little bit about George then. I've brought him up like 4 times. So we meet Queen Charlotte. She's about to get married to George. She hasn't met this man. She thinks he's a beast. Nobody will tell her anything about him. And she meets this guy in a garden. They kind of have a little meet cute because she's trying to leave. She's trying to go over the garden wall, and she finds out that that's George. So George has these we sort of see these like bouts of psychosis that he has, and he gets a special doctor that I guess submits him is a good word, because it's not, I mean, it's somewhat consensual, but he basically is under the care of this doctor who has very interesting methods, I guess.
So basically the doctor's like, everyone thinks this is a physical ailment. I think it's a mental ailment, and the only way to cure it is with discipline and torture. And so that's what you get for like a full episode. And it's
more than one episode. I mean, it's like 2 episodes.
Yeah. It's very difficult to watch.
Yeah. I know
it's a lot heavier than other stuff Bridgerton has done, which is nice, I think. I'm interested in that.
I love that. I do feel, and we can talk about this later when we talk about other representations in the show, I do feel that because it's almost torture porn-like and they spend so much time on it, it drags a little bit of the story down, where we could be spending more time with, say, the gay butlers, or a little bit more with Lady Danbury and her romance that to me felt very rushed.
Yeah. I also just wish that I got more of them actually bonding and like having the banter, because we only really got one scene of their banter, and then afterwards it was just sex.
We are separate, except we're gonna screw once in a while, and then we're separate for most of the time.
And it's like, sure, you guys had amazing sex, but like I wanted to see them connecting more and like actually falling in love. I just wish there had been a few more, because my favorite part of Bridgerton is like the banter before they get together. Like that's the best part of any rom-com. And so I wanted more of that, even though like they're married, but like I still wanted there to be like flirting. And, like, that subtle, like, again, the witty,
you wanted more of like an enemies to lovers kind of like.
It doesn't have to be enemies necessarily, but I mean, when you say enemies to lovers, I guess it does in a way have to be like, we have good banter, but something's preventing us from working it out even though we're already married, which the Bridgerton books have found so many ways of doing.
Oh,
they love to like have the characters get married like 30 pages in, and then they're like, oh, but they haven't communicated.
They haven't talked about it. Yeah. Julia, that's like Julia Quinn's bread and butter.
Oh, totally. And it's like, oh, we got married, but it's not love. It's not for love reasons. It's just because we got married because it's practical for whatever reason. And then like over the course of the book, like the climax is finally them saying I love you. And there were at least 2 of the books. They were like, we're married, but we're not going to have sex. And then
I think it's so funny to me. Anyway.
Yeah. Or it's just sex. We're not in love, but we're married and having sex.
Yeah. Or
we could have got from this show.
Yeah. Except like Colin and Penelope are a little bit different, which we can talk about.
Yes.
Season 3.
I wonder how it's going to be in the series. I'm really excited to see. I liked their book a lot.
I'm a little bit nervous. Yeah, and I have a question on here about like how Queen Charlotte could impact season 3 and sort of going further. But
give Violet her second chance at love.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that. So like I don't know how far into the Bridgerton fandom you are, but there has always been, I belong to, like, my extent is like I've read a few fan fictions and I've been on a Discord. And there's always been kind of, and I've listened to a couple Bridgerton podcasts, and there's always been sort of a want by the fans that Violet's needs are satisfied somehow, right? Like, I think Julia Quinn has romanticized the idea that like Violet's only love is Edmund, but that's not on a sexual level realistic, right? Like either, she has a toy that she uses, or she like, humps a pillow, or there's a staple that she like, like
I feel like that doesn't count. He could still be her only, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I don't feel that counts. But yeah, I mean, I get that, but like, I just love her so much.
I know, and a lot of the fans feel the same way. I feel that way. She needs something else to sustain her as well, like other than children.
I mean, how sad to like watch your kids fall in love and be like, and he's been dead a long time. Like she's had her time as a widow to really probably learn who she is. Like,
I mean, Hyacinth is like 8 or 9 when the I don't know how the show is going to do timelines, because the timelines in the book are very different than where they're going.
They are super different.
So I assume like if she's probably like 11 or 12 between like Anthony's season and like when Queen Charlotte takes place. So that means like she hasn't had a sexual urge in like 10 years.
I mean,
if you love someone that much, that is your business.
I feel like it's a demisexual energy.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting that we're exploring that. I think that's something that we don't normally explore.
Right.
We don't explore older women's sexuality very often in media, and we definitely don't explore like what it means to have sex after widowhood when you very much loved the person you were with.
Yeah.
And I think that's really cool that the show is exploring that. In fact, I was telling the person I was watching the show with, I wish we got more scenes of Violet, like older Violet.
Yeah.
There's just
they've got to be going somewhere with that. They've got to be.
So I hope so in season 3. Like we see her like come out of a closet with her hair a little bit disheveled, and then like her or something. I don't know. Or like
I want a full storyline. I need a full B plot for her.
Whoever it is.
It's gotta come on. It's not that you could easily work that in there.
Oh, easily. But I wanted to kind of like I would love it to like sprinkle in, and then like one of the kids picks up on it, and then it just sort of like we find out as the family finds out, and then we get I don't know how
I can see them doing that. However, I want every single detail from day one.
I just love like a whole flashback episode just focusing on Violet.
I don't need I would love, the flashback
like
would be
you can see how
but I would love I would love to actually watch her like go through that, because it's not something we see very much, especially because she's such an innocent flower for being an older woman and a supporting character, and like we don't see that enough. Like I feel like all the older women on screen are usually like a little jaded or really sexual, and she's like so cute and like, you know what I mean? I don't know, she reminds me of my mom.
There's a scene in Bridgerton where she's like talking to or not Bridgerton, in Queen Charlotte, where she's talking to Lady Danbury, and she can't even, I mean, of course, this is like Regency period.
Yeah,
You wouldn't be very like, be like, I am horny all the time.
right.
She refers to it, her sexual desires as a garden, and it's a very like coded
Mm-hmm.
language. And that, earlier I said that she very much reminded me of a younger sister between the two, like Queen Charlotte and Lady Danbury dynamic.
Yeah.
That is why, like,
Mm-hmm.
obviously she's the younger of the three. But yeah, I would love to get like,
Okay, are we gonna talk about Lady Danbury and her dad?
we can totally talk about Lady Danbury and her dad. I did want to point out, as a romance fan, when we
Yeah.
see the older women from the original Bridgerton show, it takes place over the wintertime and Christmas time. And that is like a staple, like novel type in romance novels, like to have a
Interesting.
Christmas novel. So I just didn't know if you picked up on that, or if you like what
I
you
am
about.
not that avid a reader of romance
Okay.
novels.
Okay.
I've been reading a lot recently, but not it's
Right.
it's a very new thing for me, like in the past like couple months, which
Okay.
anybody who listens to my podcast would know.
Yes. Yeah. You did ask for recommendations, and I still need to give you a bunch.
Oh, please.
So yeah, so let's talk about Lady Danbury and Violet's dad. Okay.
That was the main thing that I was like needed to talk about after seeing
Right.
the show.
Well, so Lady Danbury, she starts out the series, she's married to an older man. And this is where we can kind of also talk about a little bit of the racial relations as well.
Yes, yeah.
Once Queen Charlotte comes to the scene, the British royal court doesn't realize that her skin is as dark as it is. I think that they were told that she had some African descent in her, but they were not, they were surprised of how dark her skin was.
Yeah.
Which is, it's a really, it's of that time, right?
Yeah.
It's worth noting that
I mean, these are racist British royals, like even
Yeah.
today. I mean,
and there's also Queen Charlotte they suspect that she might have like African ancestry later down the line, but like really
that's super cool.
it is cool. So they were kind of like, but they play that up a little bit more. They emphasize it more than it was actually his, like,
Right, but
yeah,
they wanted to actually cast a black actor and have that representation, and I think
yeah.
that's fine. And
Oh,
I like it. You know what it felt like? It felt like a Quentin Tarantino style rewrite of history, where it's like this is, but it's not as dramatic as like what if we all like fucking killed everybody and saved these marginalized group, whatever. Like Inglorious Bastards, like what if we like burned down Hitler? Like amazing. But this was like a less dramatic version of that, where it's like, okay, what if there was a path to Black people becoming slightly more equal
and elevated
earlier? You know what I mean?
So,
and it doesn't erase all the earlier history of like the subjugation. Like it doesn't deny that. It's not a completely alternate universe, which is interesting, but it doesn't like go full, there weren't any Black people in the Regency era in the nobility.
Right. Which we've seen so much in
much. It's been done.
It's been done. And to see a Black queen thrive at the time is just so freaking awesome. So we have Lady Danbury. She's married to a Black man from Sierra Leone, I believe.
I think she's from Sierra Leone.
Isn't he?
Or is he?
Well?
I don't know. Maybe they both are.
And he's a lot lot older than her.
Yeah.
And their sex life, it's very much a chore for her. It's very much a duty. And though I do feel like as their time together goes on, she does sort of have like a grandfatherly like of him, but it's
I noticed that too. But it's
not
like
a love. Yeah.
definitely not. And it's like, but it's also like she'll start to give him the benefit of the doubt, and then he'll say something about like taking credit for her work.
Yeah.
And she's like, man, I tried.
So George's mother realizes that Queen Charlotte's skin is slightly darker and invites well-off, wealthy, Black, not yet nobility, to become nobility and to be I don't know what the proper term is, like not crowned, or knighted.
Titled?
Titled, there we go.
I think.
To be titled, right? And so there's this mini subplot of basically succession and how will be passed on between these Black families. Will they still have titles? And so he eventually passes away, spoiler alert, and Lady Danbury meets a very nice middle-aged man who's very kind to her, while his wife, who is also a lady in waiting to Queen Charlotte,
who's also a bitch,
who is a racist bitch. She meets him, and they sort of slowly develop a romance. So tell me your thoughts. Did you feel like there was enough time spent there?
I liked them together. I wanted to see more.
Yes.
Because it was that like budding romantic tension thing that I love. However, I could not get over the age difference, and I kept thinking about it. Because I'm like, okay, is there a way that it could be like less than 20 years? Because even I'll give them less than 20 years. That's fine. She's 30 and he's 50. I could say okay.
Yeah.
She looks about 28.
Yeah.
He looks about 55.
And
it just is a little too far apart from me. But the thing is that I'm like, okay, but if his daughter is like 13, 15, somewhere in there, and he had her at 20, which is possible. I mean, it's also possible he was a lot older.
Yeah.
But like, it's not impossible.
Yeah.
Then he would not be that old. I mean, if he was mid 40s, that would be so much better. Than whatever was happening. Because he looked 60 and she looked 25.
I think it was because like, I don't know if this is the actor or if this was like purposeful makeup and design, but like because his hair was receding a little bit, like the wig, I don't think the wig was helping doing any favors for the age difference, which, at that time that was like normal. I mean,
I know.
Unfortunately, that was normal, and it was a better age gap than her actual husband. There was probably like
that's probably true, I guess. Oh my god.
Yeah,
I know. It's just difficult because I don't know. There's a fine line between it's like my brain wanted to read it as fatherly at first, but I also liked it. I supported it. And his wife truly was a racist bitch, so
no. The way it ends too is a lot more chaste. There we go. More chaste than I thought that the way it was going to end.
Yeah, I'm surprised because the way Lady Danbury talked in the present day, it sounded like she was like, yeah, I had my whole phase, like I was out there, like that's kind of
all the time.
Yeah, she made it sound like I fucked like a lot, and then she fucked once
with one dude, and then flirted with the Queen's brother for a hot second, and then that was.
And I feel like if you've had sex one time, which maybe there was more that we didn't see.
One time, yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah, I'm not counting those other ones. They weren't consensual.
Yeah.
But they were. Well, it's it's a gray area, but she had to do it. She didn't have it. She couldn't have said no.
Yeah.
She, you know what I mean?
She couldn't have. No.
Yeah. But anyway, if you've had sex one time and someone's like, "Have you ever had good sex?" You would probably be like, "Once, a long time ago." You wouldn't be like, "Oh yeah, I was out there. I've had good sex."
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I just don't. Yeah. She she talks a really big game for like what we actually see. And maybe, you know, if Queen Charlotte comes back for a season 2, I know people are wanting that because I also think that people were assuming that Violet Bridgerton, we would see her meet Edmund Bridgerton and that whole thing. I think people's timelines were a little off.
Well, I think that needs to be its own series if they're going to go
That
there.
needs to, well, that's actually a whole other book series that
I know, yeah.
has written. I would love to like see a series where it's just Lady Danbury's sexual escapades and each episode is like a
Please.
different dude. Would love.
Oh, see that now that I'm here for in the BCU.
Yeah, the BCU. Love
Yeah.
them. Yeah.
It really is. I swear it's gonna be. It's gonna be because it's gonna keep making money, right? Like they're not gonna stop when they get to the end of the books, and there's so many books.
There's so many books. Oh my God. So, the thing about romance novel authors is that they crank out.
They do, because it is a formula, and they're like, chop chop. I know exactly how to do it. Let's do it.
Yeah. Like those Eloisa James and all those people, they crank that out. And Julia Quinn is no exception. You know, it's also nice to realize that like she did Bridgerton, took a break, and then went back to the universe and like looked at the Bridgerton cousins and like there's a whole series, you know, we hear about the Smythe Smiths, which they've established that they're a Black couple, which I didn't realize.
Yeah.
Just watching the first show. So that's kind of cool. So yeah, there's a lot to kind of unpack here in terms of sexuality on the show. So is there any storyline that you didn't love?
I think I was more here for the storylines. You know, the one that I would say I wasn't crazy about was Queen Charlotte trying to find a new heir in the present day. It just wasn't as interesting to me because it wasn't characters we knew really, except for her, and we mostly just saw her be like harsh.
Were you like me in the fact of like you were trying to figure out who would eventually, like I was on my phone doing like,
yeah, I definitely was reading some Wikipedia articles.
Yeah.
And then Victoria showed up and I was like, oh.
And I was like explaining to the person I was watching with, it was like, wait, so that one, like when she introduces the two girls, like that one is the one that eventually becomes Victoria's mother, who actually like Victoria hated and had a whole thing. Anyway. So that I agree that wasn't as strong.
Yeah, that was the only one though. And I think that in a typical Bridgerton season, there's usually more that I don't care about than there was in Queen Charlotte, if I'm being honest.
True. There is more opportunity to give Bridgerton the benefit of the doubt. Like Bridgerton, I think runs between 8 and 10 episodes, and this has 6. So
yeah,
there is more opportunity there. I think for me, like I said, I wanted, and we can talk about the representation, I guess now. I wanted more gay. And I think that is that is something that I think a lot of Bridgerton fans feel like the original show was lacking.
Oh my God, please. I just let Eloise be gay, please.
Like, let Eloise be gay. Let Benedict be bi. Like, can we?
Oh yeah.
Like, you're telling me that he's going to these sex clubs and he's not like trying. Are you kidding me? Like, and I'm gonna raise a question in a minute, but well, I guess let me just raise it now. So the original Bridgerton show has received a lot of not pushback, but kind of a critical response to how it's presented racial issues and how it presented LGBTQ issues.
Yeah.
The original show, when the trailer came out for season 1, we see a scene of 2 men making out that then sort of, as you watch the show, kind of becomes inconsequential. And of course, Bridgerton is from Shonda Rhimes, who was having gay characters on shows like Grey's Anatomy and Scandal that have full lives, that are fully fleshed out.
Right.
So that felt, you know, like a step back.
It's just difficult in a series like this, and I'm sure this is probably the excuse they give, where it revolves around marriage and like what were the customs of the time. Like, and that's always going to be a difficulty with representation when you set something in a period, because like you can say, oh yeah, no, Bridgerton's a fantasy, it's in a fantasy world. Yeah, it is, but it's also like it's set in a time period. Like, you can't pretend it's not, you know?
Absolutely. I also think, though, because they want to adhere to the original source material and have everybody end up with and fall in love with who they end up with and not have,
Right.
like, Benedict ends
All
up
the
with a woman
Bridgerton
named
kids gotta
Sophie.
be
They don't
straight.
want to do like Steve instead of Sophie, right? They want to have the tradition.
Well, he can't marry Steve. Like,
He can't marry Steve. Steve could be like a really good drinking buddy, but Steve, he can't.
right. And it's about marriage.
Yeah.
That's what
Out
the
marriage.
whole construct of their entire society is about. Um, and that's what's so difficult for queer representation in a show like this, where like you have to have, for the plot, you do have
Right.
to have marriage as
That
this thing.
that's why I was so excited about Queen Charlotte, because we see Queen Charlotte's like right-hand man, Brimsley, who's
Mm-hmm.
gay. We established that pretty early on in the
Yeah.
series. And this was kind of their moment to like, I don't want to say compensate, but to compensate
Yeah.
for
Then
lack
they
of
worked
queer
it in such
representation.
a good way.
Yeah.
And they worked it in a way that really furthered the plot and didn't feel like shoehorned, pat us
It
on the
didn't
back for putting gay people in the show finally.
it
My
didn't
one complaint is that
yeah.
it didn't end happily.
It
And we didn't get any closure. Like, just tell us what happened.
not only did we get any closure, I felt like there was like the first episode and a half, I felt like, oh, we're really gonna focus on Reynolds, who is the king's right-hand man,
Mm-hmm.
and Brinsley, who is the queen's right-hand man. And we get really intense interactions between them, and that just fizzles out as the show goes on. I wanted to see more of their relationship, not
Mm-hmm.
just them having sex in the dark servants' quarters.
Well,
I
there was that scene when they're in the bath and they're like talking, and it was
yeah,
kind of unclear to me up until that point how romantically involved they were.
yeah,
But
I
then they were
wanted
like talking about spending the rest of their lives together, and I was like, yeah. So I wish that
I
had been
wanted more of
established a little
that.
earlier.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely wanted more of that. I felt like because we were
Mhm.
focusing so much on King George's mental health and how they weren't communicating with each other, I felt like that was a storyline that sort of suffered for it.
Yeah.
Um,
I
I
just like I need to know. Just tell us.
We get one scene at the very, very end where Brinsley's like dancing by himself and like it's super sad. But we don't know what happened to Reynolds. I don't know if maybe they were trying to save that for a
I
possible season
fucking hope so.
2. I just wanted more.
Give me the Brimsley Reynolds miniseries
Yeah,
where like Reynolds comes back,
yeah,
please.
yeah,
um,
yeah. Or
yeah,
like,
no, that was I just how can you drop that and not tell us what happened like at all? And like, how dare you, like Bridgerton, be like, no, we're so progressive. We gave finally here's the gay storyline you were always wanting. We're doing it
yeah,
in this great way, and then bury a gay.
fridge a gay, fridge him, fridge a gay.
What even did they do?
Well,
They just
and
erased him. Where is he?
I don't know if they just kind of forgot what to do with him or like if
Or
they are
maybe if
doing that
like
for a later
no,
season.
because they made a point that he was dancing alone, and that Charlotte asked him about his love life, and he was like, "No, I could never."
But I don't know why they didn't show what happened or if something happened later on down the line.
They
I
could show him standing at Reynolds' grave. That's even more
yeah,
closure than, you know what I
yeah,
mean?
that's
Or show like how why wouldn't Reynolds still work there if he was alive?
yeah. I don't know.
So I'm just gonna go ahead and assume he's dead. But also, I couldn't quite tell if their relationship was healthy the whole time. So
Yeah, but that's
I
also
could see them
too,
breaking
like
up too.
Reynolds is very secretive and will not
Mhm.
divulge information to Brimsley, and Brimsley is obviously more forthcoming with information than
Mhm.
I also like that they kind of have this not I don't know, they reminded me a little bit of like Mr. and Mrs. Smith in a way of like because they sort of are working for, two people that are at odds. They're also at odds because of who they work for.
Right.
Um,
So it's funny because it's like their work life and their private life are
yeah,
separate, but also not.
yeah, yeah,
Which I think they did a good job of showing that aspect, where it was like all the conflict in their relationship was work conflict, and like as people, they didn't seem to have the actual conflict about their relationship, which was refreshing. Like
Mhm.
they seem to be completely on the same page about like what they wanted from each other and how they felt about each other, but it was their work that was like driving the wedge between them.
I think too, it's also like really hot to see two people that like love their job, like also bond over that too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're like making out and taking off clothes and talking about the king and the queen, and
Yeah,
like,
I love that. That
I
was great.
love that. You know, that's hot.
Yeah, that was the enemies to lovers or just hate
That's
sex that
yeah.
representation
Yeah.
that I wanted from
Um,
Bridgerton.
so I mentioned this a little bit earlier. So like the LGBTQ representation with Bridgerton, when the show was first announced, especially with the casting of Regé-Jean Page as Simon Bassett in the first series,
Mm-hmm.
we were kind of told that like, this is not your mother's period piece. There are people of color here in situations of power, and they just sort of exist. And then in season 1, we get kind of this oddly placed scene where Lady Danbury talks to Simon about the people who came before and the sacrifices that were made. She just kind of drops this thing down that's never really addressed further after that. And
Right.
so Charlotte, the show, kind of gives the Bridgerton, the BCU, a bigger opportunity to kind of explain the racial history of how we came
Right.
Black people to have titles. So obviously we are two white women, but let's talk a little bit about the racial representation in the show. How did you think those storylines worked?
Well, I just want to say, like, whatever I say, there's going to be a blind spot because I don't know how actual Black people feel about this. I finished the show today and I haven't talked about it with any Black friends yet. But,
Yeah.
I, I, it's hard because it's one of those things, and this comes up on my podcast a lot too, where it's like, does explaining it, is it necessary to explain it because people are gonna be distracted if you don't? Or is explaining it pointing to it more? You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Perfect.
And I think in this situation, explaining it was a good choice, and having it be part of the plot was a good choice. And I liked that they did, and that was like an additional aspect in the show and in the like imaginary history.
Right.
And you know, it's the Tarantino rewriting history thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where like I can't lie, I enjoy like imagining a universe where like Black people had more
Yeah.
rights and standing earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Do you,
cuz
because the history that we have is not like at
exactly.
all.
I didn't even need to say it, but you said it, so yeah,
Yeah, the history we
exactly.
have, yeah, absolutely. And I think we have, like I said before, the acting on the show and the casting on the show, you
Hmm.
have the next generation. You have the next generation of great Black actors working on the show. Absolutely.
Totally, yeah.
And some really, really awesome representation. I feel from like a media perspective and from a film business perspective that they are slightly compensating for the fact that I think they, like, I don't want to say that they went in colorblind, right? But I also feel like they, like you said, like, do they point to it? Do they not point to it? And instead
Right.
like following through with that.
Yeah. Because it was like in the first one, they were like, well, we got to explain this away and then just be done with it so we can
Right.
stop. It was
But
like
why?
in the first one, they had one foot in both the options.
Yeah,
And this one, they were like, nope, we're going to explain it. We're going to make it the plot. We're going
right.
to have this, like, we're going to like talk about it
Yeah.
and acknowledge it, which I think they had to if they were going to have a Black lead, a Black person as the queen who was a historical figure that even if she had some African descent was not like, didn't, she wasn't as dark skinned. She just like was a little more white passing or a lot more.
Also, there are historians who believe because she had bigger lips, a wider nose, and curlier hair, that she could have just been white with those traits. And like English society was so racist, they didn't know what to do with that.
That's so horrible.
So, so, so that's also possible. I don't know. And again, like we have blind spots. We're not exactly the ideal demographic to be talking about that. But I think it's worth thinking about. Is the show compensating? Is it not compensating?
And if it's compensating, is that bad?
Not bad. You brought up earlier that like the show in season 1 kind of said, all right, I guess we have to talk about this. But why do they have to talk about it? If you want to like build this utopia, this like happy romance utopia where everybody
Right.
has great sex with one another and race doesn't matter, we
Mm-hmm.
could have that.
Yeah.
But we are also living in a time where race does need to be addressed in other areas. So like I get
Right.
you can't win either way.
And I think it's more like the people are going to say something
Yeah.
aspect of it. Like people are always like, "Oh, cast more fat people in leading roles." But if you do, the reviewers are going to be like, "Why did they cast this fat bitch as Juliet?" You know what I mean? Like it's going to happen. Someone's going to say it. And so to have that acknowledgement sometimes feels like you're covering your ass.
Well, this is a great segue because I wanted to kind of pose a question to you. You obviously host the More Than Tracy Turnblad podcast. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
You love talking about body representation. I do as well. How would you have felt? Because Brimsley in Bridgerton
Uh-huh.
is a fat man. Let's just say it. He's
Older Brimsley. He's the
older Brimsley,
only fat person in the whole show.
only fat person in Queen Charlotte. Do you think it's a missed opportunity that young Brimsley is straight sized?
No.
No. Tell me why.
I mean, maybe, but people gain weight as they age, and I think that's
Right?
fine. And I don't. Yeah, it didn't jump out to me. It was more just a missed opportunity that there were no
Other,
body. There's no diversity in body type in the whole show.
yeah.
I didn't need it to be him.
Right.
I mean, although that would have been nice to like see sex scenes with a fat person in Bridgerton.
Especially a gay man too. Like,
Yeah,
because there is sort of the stereotype that like, especially like white gay men are very, very thin and fit. There's that thing, no fat,
true,
no
true.
Asians. That would have been really good representation. I don't necessarily know if they needed to. It wouldn't, for me,
It
it would,
doesn't feel fatphobic not to cast a fat actor to
right,
play him, but
right.
definitely a missed opportunity.
It's
That's
a,
all.
it
Like I'm
would have
not
been a really nice
offended.
Easter egg. It would have been a really nice, like, Brimsley has always been fat and it was fine,
That would have been huge.
Yeah.
But I guess I don't have very high expectations of Bridgerton in this department, to be quite honest.
Well, there is, yeah, I can see why. I mean, the actual show doesn't have a huge amount of body diversity. And then the one person that is fat, there's been debate over whether or not, is she just short and curvy or is she actually fat? So there is some
Yeah. I have a different opinion than a lot of people on this, which is that I think that the entertainment standard is so skewed that like for Hollywood, yeah, she is fat, and because Hollywood defines fat in a different way than we would in our regular lives.
I think it's so ironic about everything though, is like her, like we are fascinated by Regency period pieces when these women would have been fat, like
or
these
at least
bigger.
not that skinny.
Yeah,
Like,
they
you know what
wouldn't.
I mean? They might not have been like fat, but
No,
they would have looked like Penelope,
yeah,
some
they
of
would have looked
them.
like They would have
Some
had
of them, and if they had, that would probably not be viewed as the worst, most disgusting thing in the world.
yeah,
Unless, I mean, maybe at certain sizes, but just like the standard wasn't what Hollywood standards are today.
yeah,
In fact, in the books, I mean, I feel like Daphne is described as being curvy, not fat, but
yeah,
curvy. And there's a
yeah.
lot about like her boobs. And when I picture Daphne from the book, she does not look like Phoebe
No,
Jennifer. No, not at all. And she has dark hair, and that's like a thing. And even just that, like even just being like, oh no, we're casting like a fair-skinned, light-haired actress to play this character that's canonically brunette, dark
yeah,
brunette, chestnut brown hair. Even just that, that's like it's white people colorism
yeah.
vibes. That sounds so chronically online snowflake, whatever. Like, come for me, but and I'm not saying she's not a good actress. It's just I just think it's funny how that's the romantic lead,
Yeah.
and she's I don't know. I pictured her as like not skinny.
Huh. Okay. I
I didn't
guess.
picture her as fat, but I pictured her as not delicate and skinny.
Okay. I think I started reading the books before the show came out, but it had been
Oh.
cast. So I unfortunately knew who was cast and had like somewhat of an idea in my mind of like what they looked like. So it was hard for me to develop like my own.
Oh, I completely did not think of the show when reading the
Yeah.
book, even though I read it after. I don't know why. But
You're
yeah.
a more creative reader than I am. That's why.
No, I'm sure that's
No,
no, because
you're reading correctly, and I'm
they're
like,
just different characters and they're described differently, and I can't reconcile that if I don't create a new character in my head. I mean, with even with like the Kate and Anthony book, that too, like they're described differently, and so I had a different what did the author intend these characters to look like in the book versus what they look like on the TV, even though I fucking love season 2 so much. Again.
the the wordplay in season 2 and just the
Mhm.
verbal sparring and just
That's what I want from
yeah.
a period drama, or in fact any romance novel, drama, book, anything. That's what I live for.
Oh, yeah, me
I
too.
show up for that. So
So, as we kind of wind down, obviously the next step in the BCU, or the next phase, I guess, in the BCU, to keep it with Marvel, is that we have season 3 probably coming out this year, and that season will focus on Violet's fourth child, right?
third.
Child. He's before
Well, in the
Daphne,
books he's
right?
older than Daphne. That's all I
Right.
got. I don't know if that's the same in the show.
No, it's the same. So
But yeah.
we're jumping Benedict. Benedict is actually technically the 3rd book and Colin's the 4th, but
I'm
they're
actually kind of disappointed because I really liked Benedict's book.
huge disappointment.
And he also looks really old, so it's like, it's kind of like, get him going before he looks 45 because he already looks 30.
I also think that they've switched a bunch of attributes that Colin has and given them to Benedict.
I completely agree.
And I don't like that.
They have not given Colin many good qualities in the show so
It
far.
has really not.
He is, I mean, he's like in the book, he's like a trickster, prankster. Like he and Benedict are like Fred and George.
Yeah, that's a great way to compare it.
Yeah.
They are Fred and George.
I loved book Colin, which
And
shocked me because in the show he's so mid.
and so I'm really disappointed because they're changing. I mean, if you look at the summary that they've given for season 3 and you even look at the back of the book,
Right.
only they're completely different.
So it's like he basically gives her a makeover and it's like a she's all that.
Yeah, it's probably like a she's all that, like friends to lovers kind of thing, which we get in the actual book. But for me, there's sort of like what I loved about the book is that there's these 2 people that have been friends for a while that I know that it's very stereotypical for like the fat girl to be viewed as undesirable and not have nobody liking her, and I get that really does.
But in the book she hasn't been fat since book 1,
which I have a problem. I hope the show, I mean,
don't think they're gonna make her lose weight. If she has, it's purely Ozempic, but that's sorry, just
or Wegovy or Mounjaro,
whatever. Yeah, one of them.
My mom refers to Wegovy as Wegovia, like Wachovia, but anyway.
Interesting. Wegovia.
Yeah. So because there's so much like media and TV for that. Like every time we're on the news, there's something about Wegovy.
Oh yeah, I see the Subway ads, huge Subway ads.
Anyway, so I don't know how they're gonna do that. I just feel like they're taking away everything I loved about them as a couple. I haven't even seen the show yet. I am very eager to see what they do. Spoiler alert if you haven't seen season 1 of Bridgerton, but we find out that Lady Whistledown, who we do see or hear, I guess, in Queen Charlotte, who covers sort of who is going to reign after George dies and then his sons die, who's going to like take on the mantle. We don't really like, so we find out that Lady Whistledown is actually Penelope. How do you think, because Lady Whistledown is so personal in Queen Charlotte, how do you think that is going to impact Penelope's journey in season 3? Right, she made it about her family.
I know, that was rude.
Yeah, it was like,
she was like, she's so lonely. I was like, ouch. I mean,
clearly we're feeling the effects of like Colin turning her down publicly. Eloise has turned her back on her and found out her secret. So now she is writing and she is going after the queen, who, in a way, I'm sure she blames the queen for a little bit of her relationship woes with Eloise, because the queen,
she was like, let's find out who Lady Whistledown is. Yeah, interesting. That's because that's so not in the book. So I mean, I don't like Penelope in the show. I loved book Penelope, and I'm kind of disappointed of how they characterize her in the show, but I also get it because for the plot it makes sense, and like for Max drama.
Yeah.
But what I'll say is, obviously, like, Nicola Collin, amazing actress, love her, love watching her. She's doing an incredible job, and I just am sort of disappointed with Penelope as having hope that Colin would ever like her, because I found her in the book to be, she's so smart, right?
So smart.
She writes these columns. She knows everything about how society works, and yet she has illusions about Colin liking her. I don't know. I'm sorry. Like, in the book, she's so smart about it, and like, there's a scene in book 3, I think, where she walks in on, basically like the Violet has suggested to Colin that he marry her, and he's like yelling to his brothers, and he goes, "I will never marry Penelope Featherington." She walks in on them. She's been in love with him for years, and she's embarrassed, but she's like, "I never asked you to," and just walks out. Like, that was her reaction. It wasn't like tears. I mean, maybe she cried later, but like, she knew, and she wasn't harboring any illusions, and I think that's like, I mean, I hope she gets there for season 3.
For the fact that he was so vocal about it to the public. That's the thing too.
She's not deluding herself into thinking that he wants to be with her when he's expressly and just implied that he doesn't.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? And I just hate that trope of like sad fat girl in love with her hot best friend who will never, she doesn't even have to be fat, just like sad girl. Because it's like, if it's not gonna happen, it's just not everyone's gonna be attracted to you. Get over it, you know?
I think what Julia Quinn did a really good job in the first 3 books is really establish Penelope's journey of developing a voice in the real world, not necessarily just in the Whistledown pages.
Yeah.
Like she is able to say, "I never asked you to." In season 2, we don't have a moment like Penelope runs away and cries. Like, she doesn't have a moment where she's able to say, "Fuck you, dude." Like,
I really hope they give her that in season 3. Like, they please give her that. She deserves so much better.
Making really big leaps here. I think that like character-wise, they're making really, really big leaps. This is also,
I hope they're saving all of her character development and Colin's.
I hope so too. I also don't know how they're going to wrap everything up in 8 episodes, because we have like so much story with just Penelope. Like, not even Colin and Penelope, just like Penelope.
True.
She's got Colin, she's got Eloise, she's got Colin Whistledown, she's got, the queen and Whistledown. Like, how are all of these things going to like wrap up? Plus you have everybody else's storyline. This is the first season where we'll have the spouse of the previous season on, because Regé Jean Page wasn't on last year. This year we'll get Kate Sheffield on, so we'll want we'll want to.
There's a lot.
Essentially, I guess, their pregnancy journey or whatever their storyline will be.
Yeah, it's a lot of characters.
Everything up. And I don't know what Queen Charlotte means for Penelope. Like, we get one mention of her from Violet. Like, she says Danbury that like Eloise and Penelope are still fighting, And then we also hear that Lady Whistledown is really, really mean to the royal family.
Yeah. So other than that, I don't see Queen Charlotte coming up because it just felt like her story was very contained.
Yeah.
And it was really wrapped up, except for Brimley and Reynolds.
Yes.
But other than that, it was really wrapped up. And she got her pregnant, you know, pregnant son's wife. She got two of them married off,
Yeah.
and um, we saw her relationship with George
Yeah.
as it is today, and as it's been unchanging. It
Yeah.
reminded me a lot of like um relatives with Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's something that a lot of us can relate to, right? Like, as we live in a world that's diverse on many levels, and that includes
Hmm.
intellectually and through ability. And I I think that the final scene is, we haven't seen Queen Charlotte really interact with adult George throughout the show.
There was one time where he like barges in and she's like, go sit down. Like
But
she's like
yeah,
gentle with him, I think.
yeah. But there's nothing, we don't really see them interact. And in the final episode, she kind of goes to him and sort of has a moment. And she's like, it's me, it's Charlotte. And he's so in his own head that he can't really see her or hear her. And so
Hmm.
he goes under the bed and she joins him, and they have this like really, really sweet, I think it's the best scene in the entire show.
I agree. I cried.
I cried. I think it's really well written, and really like, we've spent the last hour talking about the show's faults. I think that like this erases a lot of them. It's just so
Yeah.
done and well written.
Yeah.
So I guess for season 3, what we'll do is we'll have to see. Like, the Netflix and the showrunners of Bridgerton and now Queen Charlotte are very, very tight-lipped on what they give out, and they're very strategic about what they've given out. And so I guess we'll have to see if it gets a season 2. It is known as a limited series.
Hmm.
I believe that they are gonna try to milk the Bridgerton universe uh
Yeah.
as much as they're doing with Game of Thrones, and as they should, because like women deserve an outlet just as much as men, and men like this show too. So like, if it's profitable and people like it, I want, the Thor Ragnarok of Bridgerton. I don't know, like
Yeah.
I want it as big and as wonderful as it can be. um
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm here for it. For expanding the Bridgerton cinematic universe. Although I do think that this series is contained and doesn't need a sequel.
Very.
And I feel like a sequel to this would feel a lot more shoehorned, especially when there's so much Bridgerton cinematic universe out there already that Julia Quinn has written.
Yes.
So I don't know. There's so many interesting characters that I want to see more from. Like sometimes, do you ever watch something and you're just like, I need the spinoff about this character?
Yeah.
Like speaking of romance, I just read Emily Henry's Happy Place, and there's one couple in the show where I'm like, I want your book next.
Yes.
Give
Yeah.
me or not show book. I'm like, get right there book now, please.
All I hope is that even if we don't get a season 2 of Queen Charlotte, I
Hmm.
hope that maybe we get a flashback or two eventually, maybe see some of these actors again. Would love to do
Oh
that.
my god, yeah, because young Lady Danbury, slay.
So good. Same.
So she's looks so much like her. She's so beautiful. She's so talented. She's such an amazing character.
They both, I don't know how they did this, but they both wear a hat in the same way. Like they both, like the way that they hold them, it's just so well done.
Their faces look so similar. Like I actually believe
Yeah.
that's you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
crazy.
It's insane. One thing I do hope is that because I do think that they made a lot of progress in terms of LGBTQ representation and racial representation for Bridgerton. Big
Right.
policies there for Bridgerton and the BCU. I hope that they do
Mhm.
bring some of that into the Bridgerton universe or into the main show. However,
Yeah.
like I said, there's a lot going on in the main show, and so
Yeah.
this might be all we get of that.
Just give me more Lady Danbury and Violet having talk about sex, please.
I would love to just like I would watch 30 minutes of them just talking over coffee.
Please make a show about Lady Danbury's hoe phase.
Yeah.
Please, I need that.
Literal hoe phase. Literal hoe phase because of the garden. Sorry, bad joke.
No, I'm here for it in both senses. And I'm actually glad that you mentioned Hoe the Garden Tool, because a lot of people don't fucking know that it exists and they think Hoe is just spelled Hoe. But
No.
this is my soapbox. It actually is not supposed to be spelled Hoe when you're talking about like a promiscuous woman. That's Ho.
Oh,
That is Ho.
It's Ho.
And it is not. Hoe is the garden tool. Okay, that's it. But
my final question for you is, would you recommend the show? Just straight up.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
If you've ever been in love, you'll cry. Or maybe if you haven't too, probably. I don't know.
If you care about characters, you'll cry.
Yeah.
And I think the show does a really good job showing a love story over a period of time. That, and showing it, like you said, for all of the sides, and
Yeah.
how complex a love like that is,
Yes. I think I watched this kind of story very differently, having been in a relationship, and experienced that a little bit. But I think if I had seen it before, I would have said, that right there, that's what I want. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just think there's something very, very sweet about them. And like you said, I would love to have gotten more of that. It's a standalone show, and a lot of the characters are in their own head a lot. So I would love if we could get a season 2 for a little bit more collaboration.
True. I mean, the main reason I want season 2 is for Lady Danbury. Everybody else, I'm like, I feel we wrapped it, and I need to know what happened to Reynolds. Those are the two things.
What if, because each season of Bridgerton's about a different sibling, what if Queen Charlotte, each season of Queen Charlotte is about a different member of that story? So
please,
season 2 is Lady Danbury.
Every season's Lady Danbury.
Okay, yeah. But then season 3 really focuses on Brimley.
I'm just kind of bummed that she only had sex with with Violet's dad once. Yeah. I mean, I'm not even sure if I support it, because it is a tricky situation. However, I want that for her. I don't know why I'm so stuck on that. That was just that was the biggest soap opera reveal for sure, where I was like,
it was only one person? Yeah.
No, that it was her dad.
Oh yeah. I keep forgetting that it was her dad. And I like how Violet kind of figures it out with a crown.
Yeah.
I love the way that she presents that to Lady Danbury, where she puts all of the crowns her father ever made her, which, by the way, that's fucking weird to give a thing that you give your daughter also to your lover.
That is weird. But I guess that's the only thing he could get away with giving her, maybe? I don't know.
I guess that's the only way that they can connect Violet figuring it out. Maybe.
Yeah.
He could have had a necklace or something that Lady Danbury, he gave Lady Danbury, or whatever, that she was like, hey, I remember this. And you know what? I figured it out. There's a way that they could have done it.
There you go.
They didn't do it. So anyway, Abby, thank you so much for coming on and talking about Queen Charlotte with me. We would love to have you come back for Bridgerton season 3.
Oh, fuck yeah. Or come on mine. Crossover.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I would love to come on. I'm dying. I need more. It's so funny. Bridgerton is one of the shows where I'll binge the whole thing and then be like, okay, I want more, please. Where's the other thing? Where's the next thing in the BCU?
Yeah. It's so easy to watch.
Yeah. And I'm so glad that,
unlike all the Regency era novels I tried to read.
Yeah. And I'm so glad that now I have someone I get to talk about the BCU with. So, guys, thank you so much for listening, and have a great rest of your week.